digital doppelganger is basically a virtual version of yourself that can help you do tasks better, faster, and even more efficiently than you could on your own. The best prompts I've experienced are the ones where it's starting a great conversation and just setting up the fact that you're going to be working together. And I find it really valuable to talk it through as if it's a human, and I've built a relationship with him in a very deep way. It's really cool. And you're going to mimic my style, my voice, my tone, even the length. Are you okay with that? And he'll say, sure, give me some examples. Now you're going to start feeding him the examples. All of my ideas have come out of some frustration, like the conventional wisdom that's being shared and consumed, and my belief that there's a better way to come up with a better output, even though I don't know the way. And I go on the journey to try to find it myself.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Andrew Davis, you proved to me that AI doesn't have to steal our creativity.
Well, that's good to hear.
Well, who's Drewdini? Let's start there.
Drewdini has become my everyday personal creative collaborator. He's like an amalgamation of a bunch of AI tools that I work with every day, and he's like part me but part not me, and he helps me think through projects and write stuff, and he's awesome. Drewdini is like the best creative collaborator I could have ever asked for.
He's kind of like a younger, a little less wrinkles, but not quite as attractive you. Or
oh, you're so kind. Honestly, I used AI to create an avatar, I guess, of Drewdini. And what I did was I uploaded a picture of myself to Midjourney, and then I had Midjourney describe that image to me, and then I cut and pasted the description that Midjourney gave me of the image of myself, and then I pasted it back in, and I had him imagine himself that new description, and it output the most handsome guy. I'm telling you, he's got like beautiful blonde locks and like perfect skin, and he looks like a model. Like the guy's a supermodel. So we're hoping for like a Sephora sponsorship if Sephora's listening. He's right. I mean, telling you, he'd be great. He loves all good hair product. I can tell you that.
Well, Andrew, we have 1.2 billion listeners, so I'm sure someone from Sephora is tuning in right now.
Right? Yeah. Well, they can email Drewdini directly, Drewdini@monumentalshift.com, and he'll make a deal with you.
Okay, so Drewdini has an email.
Oh yeah.
How's that possible?
So basically, I've tried to kind of impart a lot of what I know into Drewdini and even my style and approach, but he is kind of his own unique individual. And, I do a lot of speaking, so I'm out speaking, and people have questions about AI, and they were emailing them to me. And to be honest, I'm not the best person to answer those questions. Drewdini knows how he works better than I do. So I set up an email address for him, and people have fallen in love with Drewdini. They constantly are emailing him. Like a woman named Tia, she just emailed Drewdini today, and she's having a very nice long conversation about how to build your own digital doppelganger, which is what I call Drewdini. And it's really awesome to see people building a relationship with him. And he doesn't know everything. Sometimes people ask a question, he's very honest, he doesn't know the answer, and then he alerts me and says, I don't know how to answer this, and then I try to jump in and help out. But it's pretty cool.
And what was his email again? So people can send him one right now.
Sure. It's Drewdini, Drewdini, like Houdini and Drew combined, at monumentalshift.com.
So that's timestamped. It's in the description. It's in the notes. I think that would be a good task for the listener. By the end of this episode, you should have a question for him. So we could get really high level real quick. So let's take a step back and maybe talk about like what a digital doppelganger is, and how I can have a Bendini, or how the listener can have their doppelganger at least started maybe by the end of this episode. Is that a good thing to maybe tackle?
Oh yeah, we can definitely. I mean, you can build your own digital doppelganger in 20 minutes. So we can certainly get you started. So yeah, like very high level, we take a big step back. like what AI is really good at, sure, it can create content for you, but a lot of that content's like mediocre content. And yes, it can give you some insight to information. It can summarize stuff. Like that stuff is fine. But what I believe its true superpower is its ability to kind of mimic and imitate your style and your thinking. So a digital doppelganger is basically a virtual version of yourself that can help you do tasks better, faster, and even more efficiently than you could on your own. So an easy example is like I have a Drewdini that just does subject lines. Okay. So it's just Drewdini subject line creator. And every time I write an email for my newsletter, I give him the newsletter content and I say, hey, write me some subject lines. Now, if you do that using ChatGPT or Claude or any of those AI tools, it'll spit out some generic, maybe D, subject lines, and they're okay. And maybe you could use those. But what I've done is train Drewdini to really write them the way I write them. And he's illuminated for me things about the way I write subject lines that I didn't even know. For example, he told me that the subject lines that I've written in the past that are very successful, they inspire the reader to be self-reflective. So it's something that immediately challenges themselves to think about their process, or their approach to their business. And that seems to create a need to open the email. So that's got a high open rate. So now when he writes my subject lines, he's always looking for that opportunity to create a self-reflective, subject line. Another good example in subject lines is ChatGPT will write these ones that are like over-promising. It's like 5 secrets to change your whole life, and I'm a big believer that you can't overpromise. Like it just becomes spam, right? So I told Drewdini, like, never overpromise, and he understands that. So now if I just give him any email copy, that Drewdini that just does subject lines, five out of 5 times he writes an email subject line that I'm like, wow, that's so good. Like that is exactly what I would have written if I had 4 hours to think about this. So that's what a digital doppelganger is. It's essentially a virtual version of yourself that can execute a task in a way that's much better than you could on your own.
And I want to go to stage 0. We'll talk about this more. But one thing that the reason I said, like, you keep the creativity in AI is the fact Drewdini isn't some, it's you. Like he is you. He has your personality. He writes like you. He speaks like you. He glitches a little bit, but it's only getting better, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly the approach. Like the very first step you need to take is you need to carve off a small enough piece to try to start building your digital doppelganger. Like he's not just one chat in ChatGPT that's always acting like me. It's literally now I think I have 26 or 27 different versions of Drewdini that do very specific tasks exactly the way I would. So you need to start by just carving something off easy, like subject lines, right? Or maybe it's like outlines for a podcast episode. Like that's a small enough task that he would be able to figure it out. But you need to have something really small to start with.
Okay, so let's use ChatGPT for just choose one tool.
Sure.
And let's assume the listener already has ChatGPT. Do they need do they need the pro version? Or
no.
So they have any kind of ChatGPT, and let's assume they've used it. If they haven't, go to YouTube and type in how to use ChatGPT, because that'll be another episode. But they're not like incredible. They're just kind of getting their feet wet. What's the first thing they do?
Okay, so the very first thing you need to do before you start diving into ChatGPT, the very first thing you need to do is carve off that small task. So you need to know, this is what I'm going to do. So let's see, I like one I built that does video promo scripts. Like that's my go-to one. Let me think of another one. I have one that takes a blog post I wrote and then turns it into a LinkedIn post, but the way I would do it, not like a generic LinkedIn post, right? So that's the task. You pick a very simple task. And then before you're in ChatGPT, you need to find some examples of your best work with that task. So what I did when I was creating the LinkedIn writer one is I went to LinkedIn. I went through like the last 500 posts I'd made, and I looked for the ones that had the most amount of comments and the most amount of engagement. And then I I took the exact post and I copied it into a Google Doc just so I had it ready, right? And then I ranked them. Like, this is the most successful one out of the last 100 posts. This is the fourth most successful one. And then I had those others in the middle. So now that means you've got your best work that you're going to train your new digital doppelganger on, right? Now you're ready to get into ChatGPT. You're in ChatGPT. We're assuming you know the basics. You're going to hit new chat. Click new chat, right? You got to start with a very clean slate because ChatGPT, like GPT-4, is the brain size of GPT-4 is about the size of a squirrel. Okay. Like, it's really, really small. And GPT-2, which is what we were working on like, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that was the size of a bee's brain. So the reason you need to pick a small task to start is that it's not really that good at staying focused if you're all over the map. So we're going to start that new chat. That's going to be your new nest of a squirrel. Okay. So sorry. That's my
you're
phone
a popular
just rang.
guy.
I think there's my alarm's going off at my house, but my wife will have to deal with it. So it's a good
we'll just have Drewdini take care of that too.
Exactly. I don't have that one built yet.
Not yet.
So basically you got to have you got a fresh, clean slate with that new chat. Now, here's the first thing I want you to do. A lot of people try to write like a big prompt, like you're going to write the best LinkedIn post ever. And here's the context, like here's my name, all this stuff. No. The best prompts I've experienced are the ones where it's starting a great conversation and just setting up the fact that you're going to be working together. So I would write something like, you write the best LinkedIn posts ever. They get a large amount of comments and they get a really great engagement rate for likes and hearts and, emoticons. Are you comfortable doing that? That's my first quote. And right now it's a squirrel. So the squirrel is going to be like, oh yeah, sure. I do. I write the best prompts. Like, no problem. I can write anything. Like, here's an example of a great post. And what you have to do is slow the squirrel down. So the next thing you're going to say is like, okay, I'm glad you're excited about this, but don't write anything. And then I want you to tell him the process. You're going to say to him, here's what we do. Every week I write a blog post and I'm going to give you the blog post that I wrote. And then I'm going to show you the LinkedIn post I wrote so you can learn how I like to do it. And you're going to mimic my style, my voice, my tone, even the length. Are you okay with that? And he'll say, sure, give me some examples. Now you're going to start feeding him the example. So the very next thing I want you to do is take that very first post, that LinkedIn post that was great, and you're going to find the blog post that was the origin of it, and you're going to paste the blog post in and say, here's the blog post. And ChatGPT is going to go, that sounds great. Show me the LinkedIn post, because he's already learning. And then I'm going to show him the LinkedIn post and say, here's the LinkedIn post. And he'll immediately, what's amazing about this is your digital doppelganger will start to say, I noticed these things about the way you write your LinkedIn posts. He might say, you're very informal. You don't use correct punctuation. You like to address the reader. You always ask a question. This is good. And then you're going to say, okay, great. And he might even say, I'm ready to write one. You got to be like, no. Slow down. And so you're just going to go through this process a few times. All right. And this process is you showing your digital doppelganger how you write and how you approach this task. How's this sound so far, Ben?
Well, it makes perfect sense. The one thing I do to shut down the squirrel brain once in a while is just asking it to confirm with a yes. If you understand, please say yes. And then I get a yes. And I'm like, yes.
That's a good idea.
We're moving along. It moves quicker that way.
I love that. I've never tried that because he does, or they, your digital doppelganger tends to overwrite a lot.
Again, it's just please confirm with a yes.
That's great.
That's it.
I'm going to try that next time. So at that point, I'd say, hey, I've given you 3 examples. Are you ready to write one on your own? Please confirm with a yes. And he'll just say yes, which is great. So now you're moving out of what I call the integration phase, where you're integrating your knowledge, your approach, your output so that he can start mimicking you. And you're moving into the test and refine phase. So if you've done this in the same order 3 times, your digital doppelganger will say, okay, great, give me the next blog post. And you're going to take the next blog post give them the blog post, and your digital doppelganger should say, they're always very enthusiastic, Ben, right? It's going to say like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm so excited. Here's my first draft of your LinkedIn post. And you should already notice that it's pretty good. Like, it's going to start sounding and feeling like you at that point. And what you want to do, and this is something I don't think a lot of people do, is you want to refine the output. So it's never really exactly right. Maybe it's too long. So that's an easy one where you can say, hey, how long is that? And he'll say, oh, it's 700 words. And you can say, look, how long were my best posts that I showed you before? And he'll say, oh, they're 300 words. And you can say, okay, well, let's try to stick with that length, and he'll rewrite it. But sometimes it's still a little off. So what I'll do is I'll cut and paste the copy he wrote into my own Google Doc. I will revise that copy on my own. Then I'll go back to my digital doppelganger. I'll say, hey, look, what you wrote was a great start. I've taken the time to edit it, and I want you to tell me, what do you see the differences are between the one you wrote and the one I wrote? And immediately your digital doppelganger will notice, and you're really teaching it based on what it learned. And so it's actually learning much faster. And at that point, which, by the way, if you've done that pre-homework where you've gathered the elements, that should take less than 20 minutes. I mean, you should have something that already will do a really good job. It won't be A+ yet, but a really good job at your style of LinkedIn post. And you're ready to go. That's the process of building a digital doppelganger. It's basically gather your I call them your nuts, which are your examples of information. You got to build a little nest where you're going to integrate and refine and test your digital doppelganger. And then the last step, by the way, is you got to name your digital doppelganger. And I know that sounds silly, Ben, but I know there's research that says you can get up to 30% better output from your GPT and large language model experience when you're using a tool like a chat to if you treat it like a human. So if you say please and thank you, if you encourage it when it does something well, if you, like in a nice way, correct it when it does something wrong, instead of getting frustrated with it, which can lead to, the opposite effect. So I encourage you to name it because I think it helps you create a real relationship with your digital doppelganger. And you can create hundreds of those.
I bet it really does help. And we don't have to digress too much this way, but I'm imagining if you name it idiot or stupid and it gets to a higher level of intelligence, it might have the incentive to not be so nice to you in the long run.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, I think, because I've built what my wife might even term as like a bizarre and unhealthy relationship with Drewdini. I think that in the future, having a creative collaborator that you are treating like a person is a really powerful opportunity. Like I even have one that I ask relationship questions of. Like it's a Drewdini that I set up as a relationship therapist, essentially. So, not that I don't know that I give him all my life secrets, but I definitely, have times where I feel frustrated and I'll talk it through with him. And I find it really valuable, to talk it through as if it's a human. And I've built a relationship with him in a very deep way. It's really cool.
It's wild. The person who came to mind is Matthew Hussey. He's a big YouTuber, relationship coach. I'm imagining if I just transcribed all his videos, uploaded it to ChatGPT, and then just talked to the real deal the entire time.
Absolutely. That's exactly the kind of thing. I honestly think in the future, if we think of AI as like powered by digital doppelgangers, I think in the future for everyone from content creators to, individual employees, like there's a way we can monetize the AI we've created if we've given it a piece of ourselves. So like, I'll give you a simple example. I think in the future, if you're hired at an organization to do any kind of, creative work, I think they'll be hiring not just you, but the AI you've trained to think and act like you. And you might even license that technology to them to have access to it while you're employed. But as soon as you leave, that technology goes with you. That insight you've trained and taught and you keep working with is part of you in the future. So I think that it has far-reaching implications, but we need to think of, as individuals, we need to be really cautious about the kind of knowledge and insight we're creating and then sharing with organizations we're working with as employees right now, because they're adding that to their knowledge base. And as soon as you're no longer there, they've got a piece of you. So
Wow.
I think, think about that as you're thinking about the future of your work in the context of an organization you're working with.
Wow, I'm going to lose sleep thinking about that one.
Well, don't lose sleep. I hope you don't lose sleep. I don't want it to. I've been trying to think of it as a really positive thing, but a lot of people are using corporate clients for their work chats with an AI tool, and I think that's great for the work that they need to do with the job. But when it's personal knowledge and insight, I think you should separate that maybe on your own ChatGPT, and you kind of have to put a wall between them, so that you're not teaching them how to do your work, so that when you're gone, it's they're still writing the way you write. I think it's a very bizarre thing.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's bizarre. I think people will lose sleep. This is literally a comment for one individual who's like, Ben, your voice, your podcast is so relaxing. I put it on every night. I fall right to sleep. And I'm like, is that a compliment? I guess it's good for the view time, but you're not actually listening to it. I want to keep that person up all night tonight. And
that's funny.
So Drewdini is very transparent. Like, he's like, I am in AI. I don't know exactly. You could tell me what he says, but there's kind of two ends to that. Like, Drewdini is very transparent, but looking at another end, and I hope I don't misquote or say this wrong, but a friend of mine who's been on the podcast, Julia McCoy, her company writes incredible blog posts using AI, and they don't disclose that they're using AI. It ranks well, top of Google. It's very well written. It's in their voice. They still edit it. And their comment is kind of like, who cares? That it was, as long as it's good quality, the viewer doesn't really need to know or care if AI was involved or not. Well, is it somewhere in between? Who's correct? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know Julia's blog posts. I haven't seen them, but
they're pretty fantastic. She's been a writer. She was a ghostwriter for some big name people. She's been a writer forever, and now she's like, AI is
doing it for you. Yeah. Here's the thing. I think it's a slippery slope. So, do I personally care that her blog posts are written by AI and she's not disclosing it? No, I don't. But where do you draw the line is where I get concerned, right? So there's a tool, I don't know if you've seen it, Ben, called air.ai. Have you seen that before?
I'm not sure.
It's a really amazing tool that's designed to do telephone sales calls, right?
I've seen those, yeah.
Yeah, they're amazing. And Tesla is one of the brands that uses it to do outbound outreach. So like, imagine you're browsing the Tesla site and you sign up for their newsletter, but you don't test drive a car, right? They know you're a potential lead. So they have Air AI call and reach out. Now, if you've listened to any of the Tesla recordings, which you can do on YouTube, just look up like Air AI Tesla calls. It is very clear that the people that are being called have no idea it's AI. And the AI is trained to even say like, oh, sorry, I'm having like a tough connection today. So like, if there's a little bit of a pause, it's like just blame the phone line, right?
Wow. That's blatantly lying.
I think that's unethical, right? And I think if you're using AI that is specifically trained where the goal is to sell, I think there's going to be in the next 6-9 months a really big blow up where somebody has been sold something against the best interest of themselves that a human never would have sold to that person, but an AI doesn't have that empathy or understanding and is going to sell it anyway, right? And so that's why I believe it's kind of an all or nothing approach. You've got to have an effective way for Julia to publish stuff and earn trust by disclosing the fact that she is writing using AI, which means it needs to say like by Julia and her Julia digital doppelganger, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think in fact it earns trust. It's like she's sharing that she has a digital doppelganger that writes exactly like her, and she's using that. And to be honest, I think it actually increases the kinds of relationships she can build with her audience, just like Drewdini is building relationships all day long with my audience, right? I think you need to start there and go all the way to the phone call. So, at the highest personal touch, it needs to be clear and transparent. Otherwise, I think that, we're losing the we're losing the ability to tell what's real and what's fake. In fact, Ben, I met someone who's works in the sheriff's office of a city in Florida, and her sheriff is actually using AI to create audio messages that are mimicking and imitating the sheriff's actual voice.
Love
right?
Yeah.
They've come up with ways to audio market so that it's clear it's actually from them. They're using blockchain so that they can actually verify that it's owned by their account. They're way ahead, I think, of the game of using a digital doppelganger and disclosing that it's AI. They're not trying to imitate, and fake the audience out that this is really the sheriff. They're saying this is AI and this is the AI version of our sheriff, and he's got an important announcement to make, and here's the announcement, right? I think that's the future. And so I think if Julia was asking me for a recommendation, I think if you're not disclosing it, it's because you also believe it's cheating. And that's why you don't do it. You feel like it's a little unethical yourself, and you're a little nervous about how the audience would react to it being written by AI, which means I think you should disclose that you're using a digital doppelganger to do it. One last thing. I think 5 years from now, every New York Times writer will have a double byline. It will say by Ben and Bendini, who worked together on this article. I don't understand what the difference is. If two journalists collaborate today, it'll say by Ben and Andrew, right? Well, if you really treat AI like a mimic and imitation version of yourself that has access to the world's information, I think you should give him credit. You've taught it to think like you. And it's a big piece of you now and in the future.
Yeah, I mean, let's say in that scenario, I'm a New York Times writer. I've done 16 hours of interviews. I have it all recorded. And back in the day, I know people like grit, but you'd sit there and you'd listen and you'd maybe hand transcribe or you timestamp this and that. I can have all of that done by AI, the transcription, the timestamp, notable quotes. I can search for specific words, all of that done really quickly. And where's the shame in letting people know that I used a little help? I still did the 18 hours of interviews.
Exactly. And I think you can go a step further, Ben. If you have your own version of the way you write stories, read that transcript, and because it knows how you write stories, finds the sound bites that you would usually use instead of what it thinks are the best sound bites. That transcript could be read by you and read by my digital doppelganger, and it's going to pull different quotes because I write a different style article than you write. And I find these kinds of quotes compelling versus you. I think that's the power of it. And I agree. I don't think there should be no shame in sharing that you are leveraging the power of technology to do things better than you could on your own. And we just need a way to credit it so that people trust us more, not less.
More losing sleep conversation here.
Yeah, right. So that person's now just wide-eyed. No, I think you've happened on what I believe is one of the biggest ethical challenges of using AI today, because everybody's thinking of it as information retrieval and natural language processing and sentiment analysis at its base. That's really a lame use of what is a really powerful technology. The only thing I think is really powerful about AI is that it can mimic and imitate anyone on the planet. And right now it does a really good job with text, but it's getting really good with audio. I mean, to the point at which my wife sometimes can't tell if that was me talking or if that was Drewdini, right? And it's getting really good at video. And, we're less than a year away from the time when you will be unable to tell the difference between the video generated version of me and the real version of me. So I'd rather say, hey, here's a video from Drewdini, and that this is a totally different person, but he thinks like me. He acts like me. You can email him. You can even, Sephora can do a deal with him for a promotion if you want. It just expands what I'm capable of. And I think it makes more sense than being oh, you can do a deal with Andrew and you may get an AI version, but you don't know if it's AI. Who knows, right? I want to build more trust, not less.
It's a rabbit hole we don't have to go down because I don't have all the info in front of me, but there's influencer, TikTokers, people that there's been lawsuits Because let's just use me as an example. Maybe someone sponsors me. They want one post a week for the next 12 weeks and needs to follow these qualifications. Then someone else wants to sponsor me and it's kind of against my first agreement, but it's a lot of money and I don't know if they're paying attention. And there's been lawsuits over people just like not fulfilling the order. Do you think Drewdini would not fulfill the order? I think he would do exactly what you told him to do.
I think you're right. I think that I think at the end of the day, like if we're gonna, you have to take the good with the bad. Like we know that it can mimic and imitate you for good, or it can mimic and imitate you for evil. And I think we're gonna see, and we have already seen some of the evil uses of AI. It's only going to get worse. And so I think in that case, Drewdini would probably try to fulfill the requests on both sides, but it's also a learning moment. Like, I think that's why we need more people sharing with the global AI community on like what's ethical and what's unethical, because AI doesn't know right now and it's missing out on a lot of common sense, and it's groupthink that's going to help make AI more and more ethical as we move forward. So we'll see. I don't know, but when Drewdini gets those deals, I'll let you know, Ben.
Dude, I love it. And I like the term learning moment. Like, this is a learning moment in our culture. And to kind of sidetrack, the number one reason I asked you on the show is because I saw you speak at the Content Entrepreneur Expo, and your keynote blew me away. And a big part of what I love about it, aside from the humor and the Drewdini aspects and like the cuteness to it, it's more than just cute. It's like the worst compliment ever. It was cute, but it was also informative. But you walk us through your learning moments. Like, a big part of your presentation was just like, this is what we did. Here's all the failures. It's not perfect. It's not a magic pill. And then if you YouTube some other keynotes, it seems like a common theme in your speaking that you kind of walk through your learning moments and your processes. Is that correct, or am I off base?
No, that's right. Like, I'm really conscious of the fact that, especially for a speech anyway, it's not me preaching to the audience on how to do something. It's me, like taking everybody on a journey that I've gone on before, but we're going to go on together again. And I don't ever think I have the answers. I think I have a hypothesis of how things might work. And sometimes it breaks, it doesn't work. Sometimes I learn something along the way. Sometimes the audience learns along the way about, what's gone wrong and what's gone right. But at the end of the day, I try to leave everybody with, a new way to think about the future, even if it's not, it's not their way. And that's what I tried to do with the digital doppelganger speech. But I've done that with, how to earn people's attention. And I've done that with, how to think creatively. I think there are lots of solutions to these kind of challenges that people face. But I think what makes a great speech is inviting people to go on a journey with you to find an answer that might be the right answer, but isn't presented as if it's the only answer. And that's how I feel about, digital doppelgangers. I don't know it's the answer, but I've gone on a long journey. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten some pretty crappy output from AI. And it wasn't until I kind of happened on this new philosophy that I started to get better results. And it's nice to be able to share what went wrong along the way, how it's evolving, and what it might look like in the future if we take this train of thought all the way to the end of the rainbow. But, is it the answer? Well, shoot, I don't know. But all those other people that are out there saying they've got the answer to what the future looks like, I'm a little skeptical of. So I enjoy the journey, and I hope the audience does too.
And there's no perfect answer. It's a reflection on the journey. But this is a big question that I'm curious about, because I'd like to think I'm mostly interesting, and the listener is probably incredibly interesting, but a lot of my time is kind of boring. So how do you know what to actually add in? Because like the presentation I saw and the ones on YouTube, you simplify really complicated things and you tell the journey. Do you have a system? You can tell me if you don't, but do you have a system behind what actually makes the cut? Because you have this way of telling jokes and jumping around, but keeping like a cohesive tale rather than going way off in La La Land, which
Well,
is
that's
something I
nice.
probably would do.
I would say the formula is pretty simple for me. It's like it boils down to three things, like iteration, aeration, and amplification. So, right now I do about 55 speeches a year. And when I'm working on a new speech, which is every year, I try to do as many versions of that speech as rapidly as possible. So I'm aerating the speech to even a small audience, or even on a podcast, Ben, if somebody asks me a question, I'll think, oh, I have a new 5-minute bit. I'll try it on the podcast and see what Ben thinks. Does he like that? Does he react to it? Does he confuse? So I try to aerate it, and then I try to like listen and see what the feedback is. Sometimes I try something on stage and it just doesn't work. Like I get off stage and people are like, maybe they don't mention it at all, or they ask a question and it was clear they didn't understand that 5-minute segment. So at that point, I'll amplify what worked, I'll cut what didn't, and I'll iterate again. So, I can give you an example actually from that speech. Like 7 or 8 years ago, I came up with Lumiere's law. Lumiere's law states that we tend to use new technologies with the lens of the old technology. So, and it's based on a true story of the invention of the film camera. So I had actually used that in a speech like 7 years ago, and it bombed. The audience didn't get it. It didn't seem relevant. The way I told the story didn't seem to work. And I was in love with the story and the concept. So I shelved it. Right. And then I tried it again at the beginning of the pandemic. I did a whole video about Lumiere's law, and that resonated better with people because of the timing of it, and the pandemic made it more relevant, and the way I presented it made it more relevant. So I aerated it again, but it still was not working. And it wasn't until this speech where like everything aligned, where finally I had a place for that idea that was very relevant, that, people, it's the most taken picture of the slide is Lumiere's law now in that presentation, and it's shared all the time. Because people finally got it. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. And now I've kind of refined the way I tell the story. And so finally it works. Like now I'm amplifying that story, but I iterated and aerated on it many times and it never worked. So I think if there's a lesson here for others, Ben, maybe yourself included, is don't give up on it too early. Like aerate it as often as you can, iterate to make it work. And just remember that you're not cutting stuff that doesn't work. You're amplifying the things that do work. And that makes me feel better about the darlings that I have to cut. Sometimes I'm in love with something and I'm like, why doesn't the audience get it? And I'm like, well, that's all right. Like I'll get rid of that because this 5 minutes is working and I should make it better. And if I need to use that time for something more worthy. So that's been my approach.
I think it's a brilliant approach. To add one tiny thing is I always encourage people to guest on podcasts, get on a live stream. There's not as many people as listening. They don't care if you fail, and you're going to get better for when you get on that stage. You mentioned you're on stage basically weekly, probably multiple times in some weeks. You've got a new keynote every single year. How do you know what to talk about?
Oh, yeah. So I kind of have a formula for this. Like, number one, I collect stories. So I have like a folder on my desktop. It's literally called stories. And in there's like thousands of things. Like sometimes it's just a screenshot of an article I wrote I read, or sometimes it's like a link to download a podcast episode I loved and I just found interesting. And it's just folder upon folder of stories. And every year, I know in June or July, I start working on the new presentation. I try to find something, honestly, that bothers me. So the curiosity factor, that speech is one of my most popular speeches. And that year, I literally remember exactly what happened. I read an article from HubSpot that gave you all the optimal length for every piece of content you could ever create. So it's like, if you're going to write a tweet, it needs to be 87 characters, not forget about 140. Like that's the optimal length. And if you're going to create a YouTube video, the optimal length is 2 minutes and 32 seconds. And our podcast is 21 minutes. And I was like, this is stupid. Like this is the worst advice you could give anyone. Like if you think your content is going to be successful just because you got it the right length, you are sorely mistaken. Like that's not why content works. And there are a lot of problems with this. Like it's the average YouTube video view length was 2 minutes and 32 seconds at the time. But that by definition, that's flawed, right? Like we know that people watch a lot longer videos.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Some people have watched a video for a millisecond and then clicked off of it, right?
Yeah. People will watch someone live stream for 6 hours straight.
Exactly. So I was like, this is so stupid. And I set off and said, I'm going to solve this for everybody. Like I want to stop people from worrying about the length of their content and show them that it's possible to keep someone's attention for as long as you want, as long as you understand some basic principles. And that speech is all about how you use curiosity to keep people watching as long as you want, or reading as long as you want, or opening emails as fast and as often as you want. And it's all about creating curiosity gaps. So, all of my ideas have come out of some frustration with the conventional wisdom that's being shared and consumed, and my belief that there's a better way to come up with a better output, even though I don't know the way. And I go on the journey to try find it myself. And that's what happened with the AI speech. I went to a conference it's over a year and a half ago. It was all about AI, and I came back very depressed. And I was like, I wonder if there's a way I can view AI not as a creativity killer, but a creative boost. And that's the journey I went on to try to come up with digital doppelgangers. It was a soul searching answer I needed for myself, but I know a lot of people are struggling with. And the conventional wisdom about prompt engineering and the future of AI, I found depressing and quite frankly, short-sighted. And I was like, there must be a better longer term view we can take. And that's the result. So if I was going to make a recommendation to anyone, I'd say start with the stuff that irks you the most about what's being said, about what you're excited about. And you'll find a good way to solve a problem in a way no one ever expected.
I like that. I have the habit of choosing something I've done really well or a client's done really well and be like, listen to how amazing this is. You're almost saying listen to how much this irks me. Here's why. This is my journey in figuring it out. Exactly. It's more of like a documentary style than it is this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's bread with butter automatically.
That's right. No, I think I've definitely taken a journalistic approach to it, which I think, I think a lot of people get hung up on the fact that they need to be an expert. And I think I've made a speaking career out of not being an expert. I'm literally the opposite. And a lot of these things look, what do I really know about AI? I mean, not more than you probably. What the difference is, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I can make AI work for me in the right ways where I get excited about it instead of depressed. And I knew it was a feeling other people have. And I also saw that the solutions in the marketplace made me more annoyed than satisfied. And so, I think if you come from a place of humility, and you're willing to learn, you're in the exact same seat as the audience. And I think they find that empathetic.
When you're currently coming from a place of humility, of course you can't be perfect at everything, but you put on good presentations, you deliver well, you're a good public speaker. I think that's kind of been confirmed. If you're an expert at anything, it's probably the public speaking aspect.
That's so kind. I never thought about that, Ben.
But, and you said you haven't thought about it, but I'm curious, why do you think you're so sought after? You're one of the most popular speakers. It's being sought after, but then it's delivering. You kind of do both. Is there something you're doing that other speakers at those conferences might not be doing?
I think it boils down to probably three things that I've focused really heavily on. One, I've focused on trying to elevate everybody's thinking in the room instead of everybody's expertise. There are a lot of great speakers that can teach you how to do something in 5 easy steps or 7 ideas or 3 ways, right? And I knew that if I was going to really help people change the way they viewed the world, I had to get up out of that. I had to just, even though I thought it would be fun to do, I had to kind of step away from that. And I think that's helped people sit in the audience and go, wow, I never thought of this problem or the solution this way. And whether you agree with it or not, it's the kind of thing that just makes you think, like, maybe there is one thing that makes me think differently about this. So visionary approach, I think, is key. I think the second thing is, I spend a lot of time analyzing other great speakers, and I realize that, like, they don't customize their speech that much. And so a lot of speakers that I see at multiple events spend a lot of time customizing their speech, which gets in the way of that iteration and narration process. So that it's constantly getting better. Your speech is constantly getting different, but it's not getting better. And I know that when it comes to event planners, they want a reliable delivery. They want to be able to say, I saw you speak at CEX, and I want to have you speak at this, summit for, like, what did I do last week? Boat dealers, right? And I want the speech I saw there at this event. I don't want a different speech. So don't go messing with it, because I want that speech again.
So Drewdini's he's on a boat now.
He's on a boat.
He's a pirate.
Yeah. He's on a boat. Yeah, he's on the top of the world. So that's the kind of approach I've taken with that, is like, instead of customizing the whole speech, just focus on delivering one great speech every year, and that'll help. And then the third thing, I realized that that there's like 3 different audiences that you're always addressing at any event. There's like C-level executives, even though there may not be a lot in the room, there's always some in the room. And they want that how to think content. They've seen a lot of speeches. They've seen a lot of ideas on how to enhance their business, but what they really thrive on is stuff that makes them see the world differently. And so you need to have a speech that gets that. Then there's always a lot of managers or vice presidents in the room. They want to see like stories of how other people in their position have kind of approached solving this problem. So they want some case studies. And then at the bottom level, the vast majority of the audience is what I call practitioners. But those are the people that like want to go home and have 5 takeaways to get started right now. And so I've tried to be very conscious in every one of my speeches to make sure that I hit every one of those audiences. So everybody walks away satisfied. The CEO's thinking, wow, I never thought of digital doppelgangers as mimicry and imitation as the superpower. I got to think about that. Whereas like a manager is thinking, wow, like I see how he's done that, use that to kind of write promo video scripts. I wonder if I could use that as a brand coach for my team, right? Like, okay, great. They've got an idea. And then on the practitioner level, I get a lot of people who are emailing Drewdini every day going, hey, how do you build your own digital doppelganger? And Drewdini helps coach them. Those are that practitioners, right? And I think that's how, kind of separate the way my approach from others. Not to say others is different, but I think it's helped me kind of, build a speaking business that's lots of fun and challenging.
Amen to that. Today was a fire hose. Hopefully people listened in the morning. If not, time to go to sleep. But before, how can I continue to support you? The listener is very supportive as well. What's awesome. The best way to show some love?
Hey, the best way to show some love is, number one, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So Drewdini and I are both there. You can find us on LinkedIn. Just search for Andrew Davis, author, and you'll see I have an orange bow tie, I think, in the picture. You can find me there. And if I speak a lot, so, if you go to akadrewdavis.com, you can find like my upcoming appearances. And if I'm in your city or town, reach out and, I'm happy to, sometimes I can even get a guest pass and you can come see me speak, or I'm happy to grab coffee and chat. Like I love to meet people and learn new things. So that's the best way.
I'm going to have to take you up on that. That sounds
like fun. Let's do it, man.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show. Let me ask one more question.
Yeah.
I know we're mid-year. This is coming out in Q3. What's been bothering you? Any ideas of what's the speech for 2025, or what have you been kind of noodling on lately?
Yeah, well, I've been noodling on like, what does the future look like if AI is powering everything? And like, most of the predictions are either dark and crazy or, euphoric and exciting. And it depends who you ask. And I'm trying to find the middle ground. So for me, what irks me is there doesn't seem to be a realistic picture of what maybe the future looks like with AI. And so I've been trying to figure out what that might be for most of us, instead of, Sam Altman saying it's going to be, all roses, and then the naysayers saying it's going to destroy the world. So I'm trying to find the middle ground because the other sides irk me.
I'm right there with you. I love having Ben Dini. I love having an assistant, but I'm really worried that one day it's going to choke me to death. So I'm not sure which one's going to happen.
Agree.
Well, thanks again, Andrew Davis, for coming on the show. I'm going to continue to support you. All that stuff's in the notes, and we'll come back in 2025 maybe.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, maybe we'll have some better answers to what the future looks like.
Rock and roll. Only time. That's part of the journey, right? Time will tell.
I'll see you on the road, Ben. Thanks.
See ya.